Hello, I'm Justice Jennifer Brunner of the Ohio Supreme Court and candidate for Chief Justice of the Supreme Court in the November 8th, 2022 election. You are watching Achieving Justice. This is a video series of my campaign, and I'm so pleased today to have with me Judge Marilyn Zayas, who's a judge elected twice on the First District Court of Appeals here in Ohio in Hamilton County, located in Cincinnati. Welcome, Judge Zayas.
Thank you, Justice Brunner. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm so excited.
Oh, I'm so happy to have you here. I have to tell listeners and watchers that we see each other a lot on the campaign trail because she's running for the Ohio Supreme Court, and it's a pleasure campaigning with her. So, Justice Zayas, do you want to give us a little bit of your background and your biography?
Yeah, absolutely. You know what, it's been a real honor to serve at the Court of Appeals. For people to even entrust that position to me, I really don't take it lightly. Growing up, I never dreamt that I would be an attorney, never mind a judge on the Court of Appeals, and never mind a candidate for the Ohio Supreme Court. I grew up in those neighborhoods that kids uh, generally struggle to make it out of high school, and that you really don't want to be caught outside once it gets dark. I was very fortunate because I was able to get into a very competitive high school. It's a top 100 public high school, and there's 24,000 public high schools out there. And that led me down my path initially to engineering, which brought me to Ohio. I remember very vividly the first time I saw the skyline of Cincinnati and thinking like, wow, I want to be there. It just felt like home. To me, Ohio is utopia.
So
So
you
Procter
grew
and
up in New York. You grew up in New York City?
I grew up in New York City,
Oh,
all the way until my 20s it's been 34 years now that I've been in Ohio. It's been fantastic.
yeah. Oh, that's great. So what brought you to Ohio then?
It was Procter and Gamble. I came to work for P&G as an IT manager.
Oh, not that many attorneys come from IT, do they?
They don't, and it's kind of comical because whenever I visit a firm, inevitably their intellectual property department comes to see me,
Oh,
which
I
isn't
imagine.
typical.
No, it probably is not because they think, oh, the judge is there only for litigators, and we do
I know.
contract
Yeah,
law.
I think they see me as a unicorn because it really isn't common for someone with corporate American background and with technology background. And I was an intellectual property litigator. That's just not, any one of those is very rare to find on the bench.
So, how do you think the IT background helps you with the way that you've handled the law as an attorney and as a judge and otherwise?
I, I just love the minutia of detail. And notice how I said that. For other people, it's minutia. For me, it's more like to roll up my sleeves. Now it's really good. When I was an undergraduate, I would struggle to simply earn a B in classes like philosophy and history. But in my math, science, and engineering and computer classes, those were my A's. So I call it my engineering brain. I really like to understand the relationship of things and the voids. So I take my cases and I break them into flowcharts, and that way I can see, because we're supposed to be reviewing if there's error in the Court of Appeals. It's a great way to see whether there is error and where it is when you break things down into a flow chart.
Well, I'll tell you a little secret. When I was a trial judge, if I had an engineer on the jury, without without fail, there'd be a request during deliberation for a blackboard, because apparently you engineers think in flow charts.
Yes, and we're very visual. We like to write it all out and plan it all out and like see it in front of us, and so it's also very visual sort of thing of thinking it through, but putting it on paper as we think it through.
Wow. So you grew up in New York City. What? Tell me about that.
Um, well, New York at that time was very different than the New York that we see nowadays in all kinds of TV shows. Back then, I always joke around and say I grew up in a New York where it was hard to find a good neighborhood, and now it's hard to find a bad neighborhood. But the good thing was that it really gave me the foundation for what I do now and how I see the world and what my judicial philosophy is. So I also grew up in a time that there was a lot of discrimination against Puerto Ricans. There was a large Puerto Rican community in New York in the 70s. And that really, it gave me a love of people, and it gave me an understanding that no one is less than and no one is more than. And ultimately, that was the drive that led me to leave the golden handcuffs of Procter and Gamble and come to law. The law is the great equalizer. We are all the same before the law. The law is intended to be applied equally, which is, what has given me the passion to then do this run for the Ohio Supreme Court.
So you went to law school not right after college. You went to law school maybe a little bit later in life. What was that
Yeah,
like?
I was an unconventional student. So I had worked in technology for almost 8 years, um, almost 2 in New York City with the utility company, and then 6 with Procter and Gamble before I entered law school here in Ohio.
And you had little ones too, didn't you?
So when I moved to P&G, I met what is now my former husband, and we very quickly had 3 children. I entered UC Law with 3 kids under the age of 4. I went from maternity leave of my youngest, and I gave leave, and then I transitioned into law school when she was 5 months old. Was when I started.
Oh my goodness. I had a similar experience having a baby in law school. And it's really hard to read those law books with them on your lap.
But
Um,
it helps you manage your time, doesn't it?
oh, it does. It most
Yeah,
certainly does.
yeah.
Yes. That's why women, I think, have become wonderful multitaskers.
Yes, yes.
Um, so-
Justice Ginsburg always shares her stories, and it's in her bio of what it was like going to law school, because she already had her daughter also when she was in law school. So yeah, we become very hyper focused and very good multitaskers, which again gives us that foundation to be able to do the things that we do now.
well, and certainly as a judge, you're balancing a lot of things at a time. But before we talk about the judicial side, so private practice, you went into private practice then after law school?
Yes, so I actually have had experience like in all forums. I started in a huge firm. It's the biggest firm in Colorado. I was doing intellectual property and labor and employment law. I was very interested, particularly in doing labor law. So they allowed me to do some labor law, even though I was really intended to be only in the intellectual property section. My family's relocation didn't work out. Um, and at first, that was a difficult transition for me because I was really being groomed by the law firm to the point that they had positioned my office right next to the managing partner's office. So that was a difficult thing to leave, but it was the best thing that ever happened to me, because when I came back to Ohio, I took what I thought was a temporary position working for the government as a public defender, which was the best thing that ever happened, because that really brought me to why I went to law school. That brought me into standing next to people in what's often their most difficult time. Did that for a few years, and then I hung up my own shingle and I grew a practice. It was a federal practice. I worked with millionaires, asylum seekers, families, victims of violence, and helped them navigate the immigration process all the way through appeals, even going to the federal Sixth Circuit Board of Appeals.
Oh, that's fantastic. So then you started out then in the Court of Appeals. What motivated you to run for judge?
What motivated to me was those experiences that we have with our clients. As attorneys, we have sometimes wonderful experiences where we know that our client was respected and understood and heard. And even if it doesn't come out the way we wanted it to come out, we have that confidence that our client can move on with their lives and put whatever the issue was behind them. And then we have the other kind of experience that we say, gosh, there's a better way to do this. So when this opportunity came up, it was for me an opportunity to be able to be part of, we can do this better. There was a reputation in my Court of Appeals, and part of the reputation was that politics was playing a hand in the cases, and that really drove me into like, look, I didn't know what I was doing. I hadn't even run for condo association president before I ran for this. I knew nothing. But what I knew was the passion of what I believe the court should be. and the integrity of the court was something that is a driving force for me. And I just figured, like, I'll figure out the rest of it. I'll just pray to God that I'll get, the helpful people that I need along the way to get me to wherever it is that God wants me to be. And it all worked out, even though I was running against an incumbent, and like I said, literally knew nothing when I came into this when it comes to running a campaign or politics.
Yeah. And so you won your first try, right?
Yes.
That's pretty impressive because it wasn't an open seat, was it?
It wasn't an open seat. It was a very difficult run. And, but I'm just, I'm so grateful and so proud. It made me even more prideful of living in Ohio, because here I was running, still with my New York accent and this weird last name that begins with the letter Z, and, originally from New York, and didn't go to the premium schools that a lot of the people that run, that they say that they've gone to, that are local private schools. And yet the people, the good people of Hamilton County, they listened and they gave me an opportunity. And it was only a 2-year seat because it was unexpired term. So it was risky for me to shut everything down for a seat that was only going to be for 2 years, and I had to be on the ballot again. But I'm also very proud that my judicial reputation carried me into the next campaign, which was almost immediate. And the good people of Hamilton County honored me with over 60% of their vote.
Oh, that's really impressive. Really impressive. So what attracted you to run for the Ohio Supreme Court? It's quite an undertaking, isn't it?
It is quite an undertaking. What attracted me was, when you join the Court of Appeals, you really start to pay attention and read the decisions that the Supreme Court justices write. And as I was reading those decisions, there were a couple moments very early on, back in January and February 2017, that I started to, question whether there were outside influences and political influences in some of these cases. And not, not with regard to all the justices, but with regard to a couple of justices in particular. And so when the opportunity came, and I was being considered, which was such a huge honor, because I never in my life would have expected that. But back when I started to notice these trends, I actually had prayed to God and I said, look, if I ever have the opportunity, I'm going to run if you think that it's right for me, because the integrity of the Supreme Court is the most important thing. The Supreme Court sits above all the courts in Ohio and sits above all of the attorneys. Now, little would I have anticipated that the gerrymandering case would have come to the Supreme Court, and that would have played out the way it did, and some of the other cases that have also played out the way that they did. And I would have never fathomed that our Chief Justice would have been attacked simply because her decisions and and her seeing the law and applying the law as it was written, and then she was being attacked also politically, and and being talked about, about being, I can't think of the word right now, but impeached. Thank you.
Yes.
We've never heard of that language of impeaching someone who sits on the Supreme Court. So those things just gave me even more of an impetus to say, like, wow, I really want to do this, because, I'm such an outsider that I don't even have a cousin 3 times removed that lives in Ohio.
Well, so as we record this today, it's a first in American history, with Ketanji Brown Jackson taking her seat on the United States Supreme Court. But you're kind of a first for Ohio too, aren't you?
I was the first person of Latino heritage to be elected to any court of appeals in Ohio. And I've also sat on the Supreme Court by special assignment. So I'm also the first person of Latino heritage to sit in one of those 7 chairs on a case. I've also sat in 4 other appellate districts on special assignments. So, each time I sit on any of these courts, I'm always like the first one of Latino heritage to be able to serve in that capacity.
Oh, that's wonderful for Ohio. And I mean, I remember when I was Secretary of State working on bilingual ballots for Cuyahoga County, and we had a consent decree with the Justice Department to be able to do that in 2010. Now we have them available in Lorain County, and I imagine, I mean, it's nothing for someplace like California. And I remember in Ohio when we first said this is what's happening, people were in Ohio were really, but having you there in Cincinnati and potentially in the Ohio Supreme Court, I think will help Ohioans see that we are a very diverse state.
Absolutely. It's about like everyone, everyone that's qualified should feel that they have an opportunity no matter their background and circumstances.
Absolutely correct. And we often talk about the urban and rural divide in Ohio, but I know as you've been traveling the state, I'm sure you share my view that people in Ohio are really decent, hardworking people who care about their families. And
Absolutely.
sometimes the things that may seem like, oh, it's different, once they have a chance to meet you, they're like, oh, she's really nice. I mean, have you what's been your experience in the rural areas?
I've had wonderful experience everywhere that I go, and it was the same in every other campaign. So, when you're running and you're a little different, people try to tell you like, don't go to this part of the town because those people are not going to treat you well. And I would always feel like, well, why not? They're people. I'm a person, and so I would go where supposedly I wasn't supposed to go. And so, yeah, in this run, I have no inhibitions to go anywhere and to speak to anyone because people are just people and we all want the same thing. We all have a sense of community. That's what brought me to Ohio. That's what I love about Ohio. That's why I have stayed here for 34 years because there is a deep sense of community. And I know that a lot of people have a realization that to grow that sense of community, that we need to be open to welcome people from different backgrounds and circumstances, because that's the way we're going to grow our communities as well. So it's been wonderful. People are great. And even being a New Yorker, it's been kind of comical because I have gone to some of the most remote parts of the state. And inevitably, I always find at least one person who says, oh my goodness, I was born in New York, or I went to school in New York, or my son lives in New York, or my mother was born in New York. So everywhere I have gone, I have found someone that have found that affinity simply because of the New York of being a New Yorker. And we all come to the same thing, like, and yet we're happy to be here in Ohio.
Absolutely. Oh, that's great. Well, is there anything that you want people to know, especially about you, or to remember about you and your campaign as we move into November?
Justice Brunner, as time has gone on, I just have more and more resolve to join you at the Ohio Supreme Court. There's been some, excellent decisions that have come out that have come 4-3 and have included, the Chief Justice that have really been looking at the law, applying the law as it's written, not adding anything to it. And it's given me more resolve to be part of that process. The integrity of our Supreme Court is at risk. And politics playing a hand at the Supreme Court and the perception of that is growing. I feel like every month that I'm in this campaign, that seems to grow and grow and grow and grow. And we really need to take our courts back. Everyone that comes to any court in Ohio, and particularly in the Supreme Court, they need to not believe, they need to know that they have a fair chance. So every day that I'm in this campaign, I just have more resolve to join you and to ensure that we are building a Supreme Court that is serving everyone in Ohio, not only for today or tomorrow, but for long term, for our future.
That's wonderful. Well, Judge Zayas, I have really enjoyed our conversation today. And for those of you watching, this is Judge Marilyn Zayas. She's a judge of the First District Court of Appeals in Hamilton County. She will be on the ballot this fall for Justice of the Ohio Supreme Court. You'll find the justices listed according to Chief Justice. There's another candidate running, Terry Jamieson is running for justice, and then Judge Zayas, and they go in that order based on the date of their term. So Judge Zayas's term would start January 2nd. of 2023, and it's a 6-year term for the Ohio Supreme Court. So it's been my pleasure to have you today, Judge Zayas, and we look forward to seeing you all again on Achieving Justice. This is Justice Jennifer Brunner of the Ohio Supreme Court, and thank you all for watching.
Thank you. And thank you for doing this community service, Justice Brunner.
It's absolutely my pleasure.